I'm Aaron Gallagher. I have been writing since I was 5, American. I'm originally from Syracuse, New York. Honestly, the chain of events that led me to Austin is so ridiculously unbelievable and convoluted. So I'm not going to go into that. But
I forgot my camera, so you got iPhone photos.
I have this unusual psychological condition where I'm terrified to speak in public, and the moment I start doing it, I can't stop. No, it's okay. I become very comfortable very quickly. What would you like me to say? I've never been to one of these before. This is my first public reading ever. So
It's most of our first public reading,
Okay.
so don't be nervous about that.
I'm not nervous about that. I just don't know what to fill the time with.
And you've published 12 books.
12 novels. 10 novels, 2 collections of short stories, and 6 books of poetry, which I don't actually count. But, yeah.
What kind of books?
I work primarily in crime fiction. I've written 2 detective novels that are going to be part of a series that is right now planned for 5. The other 3 are being written simultaneously, which is an interesting prospect. A lot of science fiction. I've written straight drama, just a full-on novel. That was my biggest one, and it was pretty cool. It's called What You Wish For, and I really liked that one. It was about musicians in the 60s. The only genre, honestly, I've never worked in is horror. I've always shied away from that one because everybody seems to love writing horror stories because they're really easy and really fun. And I never had a really, I love to read them, but it's not one of my strengths as a writer. I like characters primarily. I usually start my books with interesting characters and then throw situations at them to see what would happen. And most of the time it actually turns out to be a pretty good story. I don't plan per se. I write very linearly, and I often am really surprised by the way the characters behave. Because if you craft a good character, which I'm a firm believer in, no matter what you do, they're going to behave according to their nature, which is what real people do, which is what I think connects with readers the best. Not to say I don't write despicable people, but they're fun to watch too.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
That's good.
Yeah, all right. I'm going to be reading the opening of my first book, which is called Magician. It's the first of a trilogy, the Veiled Earth trilogy, which is actually available, like all of my books, on Amazon. You search my name, Aaron S. Gallagher, and all my stuff will pop up. I had books ready to go a couple of months ago. We talked about this, and Jackie urged me, you should try printing a couple of your books and bringing them and selling them. I said, great. And I have spent the last 2 months frantically trying to get things together so that I could actually have print books. And I got a big shipment of the proofs for all 12. I was really excited. I'm like, oh my God, I actually wrote books. It's very exciting. I recommend it. So I got the first couple of books done and sent in and finalized, and they were going to be the ones I was going to sell today. They were supposed to arrive today. I actually stopped my mailman on my way out of my complex and made him search his vehicle. I feel so bad for the guy. I got to buy him a bouquet or something. And he's like, there's no box. Of course not. So I came down, and then I got all the way down here and realized I could have at least brought the proofs. You could have seen those. I didn't bring those. And halfway down here, I get a call from my wife. She ran out of gas on the side of the road, so I didn't even know that I was going to make it on time. It's been one of those days.
So what you need to do afterwards is go on Amazon and buy one of his books, just to support this obviously struggling American.
Normally, I lead a very sedate life. I'm a house husband, and I go to school and finish up my English degree in December. And nothing ever happens. Nothing ever goes wrong because I don't do anything. And then I try to do something, and literally every single thing all the way down the line. So, without further ado. I never have actually read anything in public. A man stood in the center of a single long room. The room resembled the lone occupant, run down, beat up, and dirty. His ribs were slats under his skin, fragile and distinct like the keys of an ancient decaying piano. His eyes, staring at Manic, seemed as aged and clouded as the windows. His long, matted reddish hair hung in dirty, tangled ropes. His mouth was a thin cut in his face, showing the hillocks of his teeth. They showed through the veneer of his gums in exactly the same way the rusty nailheads poked through the faded wallpaper. He stared fixedly at an ancient green folding table. The felt was tacky and old and threadbare. He had salvaged it from a pile of trash in front of the building, and it looked it. The table was empty, except for a playing card, an old ace of spades with creased corners from a long-gone bicycle deck. He leaned forward. He could feel his heart race faster, pulse thumping in his temples. The moment was coming. His eyes were wide, the sclera slightly discolored and red-veined. His eyes were the first thing most people noticed about him. The green one was bright and piercing. The other, the left, was pure pearly white. He had a tombstone smile, and he rubbed his arms together, scratching the insides of both elbows. The card lay more or less in the center of the table. At first it seemed to be still, but then it began to pulse. Every time he drew breath, the surface of the card bulged. When he exhaled, it deflated. He waited a couple of breaths until the dirty yellow-white face of the card, with a single black spade in the center, bowed outward and seemed ready to burst. He drew his right arm back, straightened his fingers into a rigid blade, and drove it down into the surface of the card and threw it. He felt almost no sensation, just a faint impression of damp pressing against his hand and wrist, like wet velvet. He felt only a slight tingle at the intersection of the card and his arm. Groping in the damp space, he felt something move. It did not feel like the underside of a table. It struggled, but he grasped it firmly. Like every good junkie, he always saved a taste for the end. Just a little taste to get him through to the next score. This was the Hail Mary fix, the end of the line fix, the last one. The last one before the next last one, anyhow. He licked his chapped, split lips, grinning like a skull in anticipation of the rush, and dragged his clawed hand from the card. For just a moment, it seemed the skin and the surface of the card clung to his arm as he pulled, then it snapped whatever tenuous, filmy hold it had and collapsed. It became just an aged playing card, although singed a little in the middle, as though someone had held a match beneath it. He spun, and his arm lashed out in an arc between the card and the glassless panes of a broken window. From his spreading fingers, a startled, dirty white dove flapped 3 times, flew between the empty spokes of the window, and vanished into the city air. He squeezed his bruised eyes shut and held his fetid breath, waiting for it. Nothing. He felt nothing but a tingle, a faint sensation somewhere near his stomach. He slammed both hands onto the card table, catching sight of a single falling bead of sweat as he opened his crazed eyes. Lurching upward with an incoherent cry, he frantically began clawing, sketching at the air, trying with all of his might to carve the words into the air once again, to bring the red and yellow fiery lines into being. He slashed at the air, his fingers tearing as though they could rend it like flesh, going through every spell one by one. Nothing happened. He could feel it, or rather, he couldn't feel it, his power. All he could sense in himself was the great empty hole where all of the power and will used to be. He felt a great crushing hopelessness, the realization of failure. Desperation gripped him and he felt his bowels clench as the knowledge he had fought for, the knowledge he had clawed and struggled and killed for, bared its teeth at him and grinned. He knew that feral, pitiless grin. It was exactly like his own. He went through every spell, every permutation, all the way down the list, from the heavy ones to the parlor tricks. He could do none of them. The dove had been the last of it. He had nothing left, not a thing. He'd known it was possible, the terrible, incomprehensible idea of power suddenly being gone, used up, stolen, and lost. The nightmare of no longer being able to shape the world to your will. He'd suspected it might happen eventually, just not to him. Not to him. He had never once, in his worst, most fevered imagination, ever considered the power to which he devoted his life would never not be his. He was who he was. He could do what he could do. He thought that someday he might be bested in a battle. He didn't think there were any magicians powerful enough that it could happen, or that he might make a mistake. He could conceive of the moment in which he uttered the wrong word, fumbled his sign. The unintentional feedback could destroy him. Sure, it was ludicrous, but it was real danger every time. That he could imagine, but losing it. Losing the power that lived within himself? It never crossed his mind that the unimaginable depths of limitless power within his soul could be drained, used up. That he could be left like a barren desert under which a vast reserve of oil had once lain. The ghost of former glory and potential, forever wrung of every drop of power. That it could be just gone. His eyes opened. They were filled with horror and desperation and finally rage. He became a whirlwind storming around the small room, screaming wordlessly. He snapped the weak back of the table with doubled fists, kicked his pillow, picked up a stray glass and threw it against the wall, and didn't even see it explode into a storm of glittering dust and shards. He ran blindly around the room like a toddler in the midst of a tantrum. He finally threw himself at the wall with a shuddering crash and collapsed sobbing to the floor. His fragile body shook with the wailing, the guttural screeches, and the screams. Eventually, he cried himself out. He hiccuped 5 or 6 times, shaking in the aftermath of an adrenaline come-down. Finally, he became calm again and lay there breathing slowly and heavily. He stared dully into space at nothing. This was it then. He couldn't even feel it anymore. Hadn't started like this. He had potential once. Potential. Hell, he'd been great once. Great. He'd been the best. There were people in this world whose hands trembled when his name came up in conversation. He knew there were people out there who would give an eye or a leg to learn from him. And there were still people out there who would breathe a happy sigh of relief when they knew for certain he was truly, completely, irrevocably dead. How did it come to this? Well, it wasn't his fault, of course it couldn't be. It was... Well, who was he kidding? Who was there to kid? He knew exactly where the blame for his fall lay. He'd been many things in his short life, but self-deception had never been among his myriad talents. He knew all of the things he could be and had been: thief, liar, murderer, sinner, bastard, coward, hero, bastard, saint. He wouldn't lay the blame for his mistakes in any feat of his own. Besides, he'd long ago chased away the few people who could have borne the brunt of his accusations. His scrawny shoulders would bear the weight of his sins, and that much he could do. He couldn't have fallen so far unless he truly, completely, epically screwed up beyond all belief. So maybe he should just kill himself. It wouldn't be that hard. He was close to starving to death. It wouldn't take much to go into arrhythmia and shut his eyes for good. Or maybe out the window. It was high enough, right? Quick drop, sudden thump, or he could get a gun. A razor blade, that would be easy. A warm bath, a quick slash. Bleeding is like falling asleep. Well, pills. How about pills? The last of his dogged pride and determination surfaced and surprised him. This was bullshit. This was cowering weakness. It was disgusting. He was disgusting. It was a perversion of everything he had ever been. He was a world shaker. He was a magician. And he was worth any 3 practitioners. Hell, 10. All of them put together, wasn't he? He was pathetic, but he had power once. That was before. He needed more and more just to get the glow. He needed the big ones. And he knew he didn't have it in him to do the big ones yet. His head rocked back gently to thump against the wall. The thought came out of nowhere. He'd always eschewed props. He was a hands-on kind of man. He disdained anyone who needed help. Anyone who couldn't bring the power without a focus wasn't worth his time, wasn't worth the spit. And he cringed to realize he'd sunk so low as to need one himself now. But maybe with a focus, he could increase the power. Maybe that could substitute for his weakness. Maybe he could distract the power and his powerlessness. He could get the blow and another push, and he could... Be honest with yourself, he thought. It's time. But not one of the coward's ways. A razor. How would you look on a slab? Would you look like the most powerful man in the world? No. You'd look like another loser bum who didn't have any control over it. Just another failed and miserable life. No mourning, no funeral, no great loss. Not him. Not like that. But how? Well, the only way, of course, would be a spell. Not just a spell. The grand make of all spells. The big one. The last one. And no dodging the price. Nope. He could cast a spell and let it consume him. He'd be the fuel. He would disappear into the spell itself. Let it use him up. Burn him up. And after everything's settled, after the dust cleared, those who knew about those things would talk about them. Whispers. Stories. Fear and awe. His ghastly smile stretched his lips wide again. He would vanish into the magic. Vanish into the legends and stories they already told about. No matter what else they felt, they'd never forget. Never forget him. It would be something they'd talk about for generations. Something to make his mark. He would show these people something they couldn't have dreamed possible. Even the other magicians who knew what they knew would stand in awe and respect and fear. He'd show them. He'd show them all. By God, he'd make damn sure they'd feel it.